Hi everybody. This is Bryn from Ede Noa Ede. Today I have with me Donatus Ozemhoya. He will be speaking about navigating global policy and educational equity. So welcome. Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Donatus Ozemhoya. I was born in Edo State, Nigeria. So I grew up in Nigeria and had my education too in Nigeria. I did my bachelor's in political science and my first master's degree in policy analysis. And then most recently, my second international master's degree in South European studies from the United Kingdom, Britain. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh.
Yeah, so as a CFC fellow at Chatham House, what key policy areas are you currently focusing on?
At Chatham, let me first of all be clear about my engagement with Chatham House. I'm more or less on a policy kind of training, so I'm not to be seen should to be accorded the privileges or the regards that are due to full employees of Chatham House. So I'm more or less like a policy training, and the program allows me to engage with the experts at Chatham House, go for conferences, join both virtual and,
Yeah.
in person, and then learn and also add my voice because the initiative is like a basis to add the voices of the next generation to the policy engagement of Chatham House. I did a similar program previously with the Center for European Policy Studies. So it's more or less like giving young people the opportunity to influence global policy making. So that said, as part of this program, what I've been doing basically is try to like assess more issues, developmental issues from the context of Africa and Europe, which are, the key regions that I'm interested in when it comes to global affairs. So far, I've been, observing several programs within the organization. There have been conferences here and there that I've participated in, opinion articles that I've also read from experts. And then again, outside of these two regions, you agree with me that the return of Trump, so the White House, that's Trump 2.0, has been quite intriguing. And of
Yeah.
course, the hula balloon that have accompanied all of this, it's also making the American foreign policy stance quite interesting in recent times.
Yeah.
So this is another, policy area that I've been quite, trying to observe closely. But outside of this, I'm much more interested in African and European policy development. Thank you.
Amazing. So, how do you see the role of governance in addressing challenges faced by undocumented migrants and marginalized communities?
Governance is essentially an ecosystem that encompasses a lot of actors. Within that ecosystem, you have the government itself. Within that ecosystem, you could, locate the press or the media. You could also have the non-governmentals functioning there. Of course, religious groups could be there. So the governance, ecosystem is a platform that allows a lot of actors or institutions
Mhm.
to coordinate activities in view of managing societal realities. So when it comes to the issues of undocumented migrants, I would like to speak from the perspective of governments, the media,
Yeah.
and non-governmental organizations. What can the government do in this regard? The government first can make the necessary policies because that's a major thing that the government is known for, policy making. So the government should first of all be ready to make the necessary policies that should help, probably change the status of this people from being undocumented to probably being, legitimate members of the society. So
Yeah.
the policy can give the direction to such development. And then again, there are needs for institutions, the necessary institutions that also should drive this process. Also, is the responsibility of the prevailing government system to initiate those those institutional, architecture that should drive probably the integration of this category of people to becoming full-fledged members of the society they now live in. So another thing that the governments could do is to reform policies. Often now and then we realize that the world is evolving, and at some point you realize that policies that used to be, uh, the reference points on certain issues become obsolete. They are no longer in tandem with best practices. So it is also the role of the government to initiate the necessary reforms that will bring these policies that are probably becoming obsolete to be at tandem with what is now, in vogue globally. So also this another area reforms that governments can use in like supporting undocumented migrants to like change their manage their challenges and probably change their status from being unrecognized to being recognized and full-fledged members of society. And then when it comes to the media aspect of it, the media has a key role to play in terms of portrayal. That's very important.
Yeah.
How media portray undocumented migrants is very, very important.
Yeah.
Can be a smoking gun for a lot of possibilities. First, it can make migrants look like threats to security in the sense that they securitize these undocumented migrants,
Yeah.
and this means that majority of society will see this guy as threats to national security, threats to social cohesion, and threats to a whole lot of things that borders on societal issues. So the media, first of all, has to play the role of portraying these guys as positive, members of the society,
Yeah.
portraying them as an addition, a positive addition to the society they now live in.
Yeah.
And if this is not done, we risk making the society see these guys as threats. And sometimes, just like what happened last year in Britain, somewhere in London, England, we saw how the members of traditional British were unleashing their anger on both minorities and those that are seen to be members of the Islam strand of religion. So this if when I was observing that incident, I traced the evolution of that chaotic that chaotic event to a lot of factors. One of it being the role that media have played, making
Yes.
migrants, scapegoating migrants a whole lot of times, making them look as though they are coming to take our jobs, they are coming to steal our deals, So all of this narrative are building a philosophical background
Yeah.
on people's mind, on
Yeah.
your citizens' mind. Over time, when it's beyond, level when they can longer cope with it, they begin to take, decisive action, sometimes prosecuting and descending on these guys physically to express their disapproval. So the bottom line is the media has a huge role to play in terms of how they portray undocumented migrants. They must cease from portraying them as threats to society. They must cease to portraying them as threats to national security.
Yeah.
Until that is done, the plights of undocumented migrants will continue to should I say, worsen over time. So yeah, that's that. And finally, for non-governmental organizations, the role is basically for them to continue to advocate, engage governmental systems and all other stakeholders through advocacies to making sure that these undocumented migrants can be integrated into society properly, and then probably to also manage negative stereotypes, just like what I was speaking about with regards to media. It's the role of non-governmental organizations to stem that tide,
Yeah.
drive the necessary message that allows society to see these people as positive additions. And yet, basically, that is how I see the role of governance in terms of managing the challenges of undocumented migrants. Thank you.
Yes, no, that's a great answer. It's very important, and the media has such a
Yeah,
can
key
have
role
such
to
a
play.
negative effect on how people are
Exactly,
perceived. So
exactly,
and that's kind of
exactly.
what they're doing. So changing that narrative is definitely
Yeah,
important.
very important.
So you've been vocal about reforming English language proficiency requirements for African
Yeah.
students. What changes have you advocated for, and what impact have you seen so far?
Yeah, with regards to Reform Heights policy,
Yeah.
that campaign, I actually engaged with that campaign with Policy Shapers. Policy Shapers is a Nigerian-based youth-led organization that tries to like leverage the voices of youth in driving key policy development, both nationally across Nigerian state and internationally. So our advocacy with regards to the reformized policy was basically that we are an English speaking people. We're colonized by Britain, and through that colonial history, we got English bequeathed to us, and one of the legacies of colonialism. So as a result of this, everything that an average Nigerian does is in English. Go
Yeah.
to church, you speak English. Go to your school, you speak English. You are a working class, you speak English. Anything official is in English.
Mhm.
So, and over time, we've even seen that sometimes, in fact, I'm not being hypocritical. The fluency with which I'm communicating with you now, I don't think I have that when it comes to my indigenous mother language.
Yeah.
So obviously, our mastery of English have even come to like undermine our mastery of our indigenous languages.
Mhm.
So and then you realize that despite this level of mastery and competence,
Yeah.
when it comes to global affairs, international relations, certain countries will still ask you to go and prove, not just maybe through some documentary evidence, but to prove to the extent that you have to write an exams to show that you can speak English correctly.
Mm.
So our advocacy has been with regards to key reforms in terms of costs, because as at the time I really engaged some media houses like Arise News in Nigeria, the BBC in Britain, with
Yeah.
regards to this advocacy. It's the cost of that exam was about three times the minimum wage of Nigeria at the time. Minimum wage of Nigeria, it was three times the minimum wage. So, and now in Nigeria, we have if inflation have not risen in recent times, it's have risen about for with about 50% since that time. So you can see what it means for an average Nigerian
Yeah.
to write that exam today. It's a lot because not so many people even have access to the minimum wage
Yeah.
to start with. Not so many people even have access to that because we're still battling inflation, battling unemployment, a whole lot of socio-economic challenges. So this is why we've actually asked that truly, if these tests should continue to stand, at least there should be some concessions with regards to costing. Let it not be as though the exams is a way of probably, also getting money away from these people that already don't have money.
Mhm.
Let it be that, okay, you really want to see that we can write the exam. And if that is the case, make it far more cheap for people to like book these exams and write and prove that they can speak English.
Yeah.
So that is one of the basis for our advocacy. Another is the validity. People have to write this exam just after 24 months, which we think is too short.
Yeah.
And considering the cost, asking people to be writing this exam intermittently within the period of 24 months seems to be quite realistic, and
Yeah.
maybe not so considerate too. So this is another basis for our advocacy. And then another aspect of it is a complete paradigm shift in that let the requirement be scrapped if possible.
Mhm.
Let the requirement be scrapped because the Home Office, there is a template for which the Home Office exempts people from these exams or this conditionality, and they call it majority English speaking country list. So that list is updated over time based on how the Home Office observes English usage across countries. So when we wrote them, they actually replied, and we had a lot of communications with them. And one of those correspondence they sent us was that the benchmark for including a country on the majority English country list is that such a country, at least 51% of its population should be speaking English.
Yeah.
And as it stands now, it's over 80% of Nigeria speak English.
Yeah.
Of course, we have our own indigenous language, and that is not an issue. Like I told you, some of these languages are even gradually going extinct thanks to the English language.
Yeah.
So our argument now is that uh, let's also look at the possibility of scrapping it, and then add Nigeria officially to the MEC list. That's the majority English-speaking country list. Because we find the likes of Guyana, the likes of Jamaica, Malta, Australia, there are a lot of countries around Europe and other parts of the world that actually, when it comes to being multilingual in nature, they are even more heterogeneous compared to Nigeria. In terms of, I mean, with regards to languages,
Yeah.
they use more languages than Nigeria, and even it's much more painful that some of these countries don't even accept English as their first language. I think is Malta, because about over 90% of the Maltese speak
Yeah.
Maltese as their first language. They
Yeah.
only have English as an additional language because they are also part of, they're also a Commonwealth member of the Commonwealth of Nations.
Yeah.
So we're arguing now that you have these kind of countries that are not even having English. They don't even treat English as their first language, but yet they make the list of exempted countries from the English conditionality. Then you have Nigeria that actually speaks English and uses this language as its official and first language, being required to still go and demonstrate proficiency with exams. We
Mm.
think there is, yeah, I don't know, the standards are not
Proceed.
quite clear,
Yeah.
and like double standard. And
Yeah.
so this is also part of the logic for our advocacy. And so basically, for the wins that we've seen so far through the advocacy, we've seen a lot of universities, you know, removing, should I say, adding Nigeria to the countries that are exempted from this conditionality. So Nigerians are not another Anglophone, citizens cannot join these institutions without having to write these exams. At most, you are asked to provide probably a letter, an official letter from your institutions, noting that the mode of instruction during your studies were in English, probably for your degree or something, just to prove that you were taught in English. So we've seen a lot of that. I've seen this multiplier effects as a result of our advocacy. At some point, I got a message from the education director from Calvin University in the United States
Yeah.
that they actually have added in Nigeria and a couple of Anglo-African countries to their majority English country list, that they wanted us to like update our own database as well, and
Okay.
then issue a communique to that effect
Yeah.
that we've received the words of the university that they've also included Nigeria to their English speaking country list. So we've seen a lot of quick wins here and there. Just that on the part of the British government, we've really not seen that the kind of review that we've been advocating for.
Yeah.
Even within Britain, there have also been a lot of institutions, and I still remember the Nursery and Midwifery Council, which we engaged with independently. At some point in June 2022, they initiated a review of their English requirements and conditionalities for their professionals. So these are some of the quick wins we've had with the engagement, and a lot
Mhm.
of institutions have been joining the bandwagon, including Nigeria, in their majority English country list, and as such,
Yeah.
allowing Nigerians to probably come, join any professional engagement or educational activities without necessarily having to write IS to prove that they can speak English language.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That's great answer. How do you believe international institutions can better support equitable access to education for students from the global south?
I think this question is quite related to the one we just discussed,
Yeah.
and I will say I will speak from three main thematic areas. One is I'll say that one of the ways they can actually do this is to have what I'll call con- contextual concessions. You
Yeah.
have to you want to look at the members from the global south that are actually probably making some applications to your institutions or try to engage you for some of professional you know rewarding activities or initiatives.
Yeah.
So when you look at the contextual background, you realize that, oh, those that are probably trying to join you from the global north and those that are having a global south background, they have a lot of realities that are in stark contrast. You know, an average member of the global south community might likely be battling with inflation from their countries, probably unemployment, or maybe when they are employed, you could be battling underemployment. That
Yeah.
means not optimally employed. So all of these have a way, uh, it impacts their, should I call it disposable income, something. So
Yeah.
overall affects their purchasing capacity. The financial resources at their disposal. So you have to put all of these contextual realities in context when you are probably accessing applications or trying to make judgment about those that are coming from the global south. you know so this one of the approaches that I think can be used to like make educational or international opportunities more accessible to members of the global south. Another one is to always mainstream the north-south divide dynamics of the north-south, global south and the global north.
Yeah.
You know, understanding how they compare and contrast in terms of opportunities, possibilities, and all of those kind of considerations. Then finally, I think another thing that institutions can do globally is to like have a robust CSR policy. Corporate social responsibility, initiatives could help a lot, especially in terms of funding and some other technical support. Because I know globally funding is actually a very, very controversial issue at the moment.
Yeah.
But if you look at the development gap, especially when we still talking about the global north and the global south,
Yeah.
you agree with me that funding is still a key thing that should be sustained in certain areas. In fact, I'm here in Europe now,
Yeah.
thanks to the EU funding. And trust me, if not for that funding, I probably would not be able to like, even if I'll be able to be in Europe, it would have come with a lot of,
Challenges.
stress financially. And
Yeah.
so I think that's another way that you could, institutions could globally facilitate and, make, international opportunities more accessible to members of the global South.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So, studying across multiple countries, including Spain and Greece, what cultural or academic differences stood out to you, and how did they influence your worldview?
Mm. Uh, Studying across multiple countries and universities in Europe, yeah, I think I actually had a couple of cultural shocks, both socially and academically speaking.
Mhm.
From a social context, I think the first shock I experienced was with regards to social behavior. I remember the night I arrived in Europe, in the United Kingdom, on 12th September 2022. The next morning, I just stepped out from my dormitory, the temporary apartment I had then. And as I was just coming out, I met a young lady smoking outside publicly. I was taken aback because that was really, really strange. Although you
Mhm.
could have the female, gender smoke in Africa, but not with the level of confidence and
Yeah.
you know, the level of I don't know how to really explain it now, but it doesn't really happen that way in Africa. And for the majority of cases, you only would mostly see men smoke with such confidence and should I call it bravado? So yeah, I saw a lady smoking just outside of my apartment publicly and confidently. So that was the first shock I got. Outside of that, I also had shocks with the fact that the food is quite different.
Yeah.
Coming up from where most of the food you used to is like the eba, fufu, and then egusi soup, jollof, Nigeria jollof
Yeah.
rice, and those likes. Now you have to get used to the likes of, burger, um,
Yeah.
um, then cheese, fries, and
Yeah.
falafel,
Fast
you
food.
know. So those kind of, yeah.
Hmm.
So all of these are some of the shocks that one of, tried to, deal with while living here in Europe. Another being the fact that I realized that back here, unlike where I'm coming from, there's this tendency for social interactions to be quite how will I put it now, business like.
Yeah.
In Africa, there and precisely Nigeria, where I'm coming from, you can't really have a young person maybe pass an aging person just
Yeah.
like that. You probably have to say greet them and probably even greet them. In fact, there is a part of Africa, sorry, Nigeria, the Yoruba ethnic group, that you even could prostrate the young before an elderly person as sign of greeting and
Yeah.
regards for them. But back here, you could pass similarly, like aging people, just pass them. You even decide not to say hi if you like, and
Mm.
nobody cares, and everybody
Yeah.
just do their thing. And sometimes I find myself even wanting to like show them respect, and
Mhm.
the thing is sometimes it comes across as you being even strange.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So somebody would be like, why are you doing that? What's that? But that,
It's
but actually,
consideration.
yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it's strange. You are being weird.
Yeah.
But actually, where you're coming from, that is the expectation. That at least
Yeah.
you see somebody that is far ahead of you. You should probably greet them, and you should greet them respectfully, like
Yeah.
maybe bear down, and So yeah, these are some of the shocks that I've tried to like get used to,
Mhm.
and they've actually shaped me a lot. And yeah, from the academic side, what stood out most for me is the writing style. You know,
Okay.
it's not as if this writing style, it's not actually back then where I'm coming from, but it's quite the emphasis is quite different here in the sense that back here you are expected not just to write, but
Mm.
there is emphasis that you should be critical in your writing, you should be very analytical in your writing.
Mhm.
And why that element is actually part of where I'm coming from, the emphasis is quite different here. It's not as emphasized as it is here, compared to where I'm coming from. So the writing style here is quite different as well. So I had to learn how to really make sure that when I'm reading, I'm looking for loopholes. I'm looking for, even if not loopholes, I'm looking for how to like maybe add to the argument, add to bring
Yeah.
some further context into it. Just thinking outside the box
Yeah.
whenever you're reading. So it also changed my view a lot. And then I must not forget religion. I've really been impacted. And I see religion currently is very, very different
Yeah.
from when I was in Africa, because especially knowing that religion was actually the religion we practiced back there is actually something that we got as part of colonial encounter. It really makes me think differently about religion now, being in the countries that actually gave us this religion,
Yeah.
how they practice it, how they value it, and
Yeah.
how we do back there in Africa has really changed the way I think that's really where I want to talk about how it has influenced, how these shocks have influenced my views.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm not longer a believer in Christ, or I'm no longer a Christian. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that basically my views about how religion works is quite different from how it used to be while I was still in Africa, because
In
I've
a
seen
in a positive or a negative way. Sorry to interrupt you.
yeah, I think from if I want to be fair, I think the practice of religion, in my opinion, in Africa is both positive and negative.
Hmm.
So, and then from the negative side, I think that's even where I have some concerns, mostly because I think the way we practice it there is, one of the issues I have with how we practice it there is time. And that's also one of the cultural realities I found here. How people deal with time. If people tell you they are going to meet you by 11 at max, few minutes past 11, whatever you're supposed to have is
Yeah.
already happening. But in where I'm coming from, you can find out that maybe a bit behind time before this event starts. So
Yeah.
all of this have influenced my perspective. And one of those things I'm also challenging with regards to how we practice religion, there is timing. You could go
Mm.
to church and spend over an hour in church.
Mm-hmm.
But here, I've attended masses. The last time I attended mass in Edinburgh, it was less than an hour. I think about 30 to 45 minutes. The whole mass was done.
Mm-hmm.
So that approach to how we practice it, I think there are some fundamental issues that need to be addressed because people are comfortable being in church for even 3 hours of the day. See, they are not bothered,
Yeah.
and I think there's also I usually do feel that Africans also believe that the way some people practice Christianity in Africa is such that some, not only Christianity, just religion generally, some believe that they could even pray themselves out of poverty.
Mm.
That's how
Yeah.
wrongly perceived
Yeah.
the institution have been over time. So these are some of the issues I have with how it is practiced over there. And I hope someday we can do better in those regards.
So do
But
you,
obviously, it's not totally negative. There are also positive issues there. Just that, for time's sake, I just want to highlight some key ones that I think
yeah.
are the issues that should be worked on to make religion more profitable to the continent.
Do you think, sorry, this is as you were saying, people are think they can pray their way out of poverty. Do you think it's because people have more hope in religion in, say, Nigeria, or do you think
Hmm,
like in
quite
the
interesting. That's quite an interesting question
because
because
they have
the
more people
question you
turn to
ask now.
it?
Yeah. The question you ask now, there's a serious element of validity there,
Yeah,
because since the social contracts continue to fail and fail the people over time,
yeah,
I think that's also what have made religion quite a safe haven.
yeah,
You know, for people, people say it as the final recourse.
mm,
Where they can, probably find a refuge or salvation,
yeah,
given the fact that the society obviously do not care, and it's obviously a problem, one problem or the other. Politics is not working in their favor.
yeah,
So yeah, you are right in some way that it could be that religion is perceived that way, given the continuous failure of the social contracts, which is another thing entirely. If we want to start going into details, but yes, you are not actually wrong in that regard.
yeah,
It's a contributing factor.
yeah,
And that's why if we want to start on unraveling these
mhm,
issues, we
yeah,
also need to go back to how we make the social contracts more. Well, when I mean social contracts, let me not to be too technical. Talking
yeah,
about government, the governance system, how effective it has been over time. We also
yeah,
need to go and see how to make it more accountable to the people.
mm,
Because I remember, as strangely as it sounds, I still marvel at the reality that in Europe, I literally have energy, electricity as a given.
yeah,
Back there in Africa, I've not forgotten that a couple of times,
yeah,
my mother, my biological mom, says the rosary. Catholics know what's rosary, like
yeah,
it's an instrument of prayer.
yeah,
Sometimes people says the rosary just so that we will get electricity
mhm,
miraculously.
yeah,
So that's the level, like you said, you
yeah,
can see the connect between the failure of governance and how religion is beginning to be like a safe haven. And then
yeah,
that justifies the argument of Karl Marx that it is the opium of the masses.
yeah,
So obviously there's a way the failure of governance leads people to think, oh, okay, maybe God, not of course God is the ultimate, but then they now believe that, okay, maybe religion, prayer, all
mhm,
of these spiritual activities probably will give us the solution that we haven't gotten elsewhere.
yeah,
Which is actually a bit you know, wrong, because now I'm in a society where the social contracts is quite effective. And you can see now that something that my mother prays for
yeah,
is a giving.
yeah,
It's just like the air I breathe. So you can see I believe you are conversant with the headlines that followed the blackout that happened recently in Spain. You know,
Yeah.
just about a day or two of blackout, the whole world was aware. That's to tell you that it's now seen to be abnormal that there is no electricity.
Yeah.
But there are some people elsewhere in the world, particularly in the developing world,
Yeah.
where even having lights for like maybe 72 hours non-stop is a miracle.
Yeah.
So you see,
Yeah.
it's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are some of the cultural shocks that being in Europe has, you know, brought me to, to engage with, they are not like lived experiences for me, and to a very large extent, they've shaped my perspective,
Yeah.
shaped how I see things, shaped how I understand people, and yeah, they've also influenced my passion to want to understand the world more. I've always want to travel more
Yeah.
because I've seen it as an opportunity to see the world beyond,
Yeah.
beyond the limits of, beyond the current horizon that I am, as
For
far
sure.
as, exposure is concerned, because
For
it
sure.
is by traveling and learning about, global affairs that it's beginning to, interrogate these issues and understand them from different perspectives.
For sure.
Yeah.
Understanding why people do the things they do.
They do, exactly.
Yeah. Based on the system they live in.
Exactly.
So, can you discuss your experience facilitating workshops on anti-racism efforts within the EU, and what were some of the key takeaways?
Yeah, that workshop was, I participated in that workshop as part of the delegation for the Diaspora Vote. Diaspora Vote is a Brussels-based, non-governmental that is actually focused on, you know, supporting migrants, driving advocacy to drive the process of, to influence the process of integration, and to also like, challenge those traditional opinions. So actually, it's not really traditional, like, far rights and, extreme rights, apologies that tends to portray migrants as threats to society.
Mm-hmm.
So Diaspora will just essentially work to check some of these, issues within the EU and to drive, overall positive, opinion of migrants within the European Union. So it was, part of its delegation that I joined that program. That precisely the program was the European Youth event at the European Parliament. It happened at the European Parliament headquarters, which is based in Strasbourg in France. So the workshop essentially was to take stock of how the EU have failed with regards to its anti-racism, initiative. So the anti-racism action plan of 2020 to 2025, just a few months away now before it elapsed, has actually set the tone for EU's, anti-racism efforts.
Yeah.
So essentially, the plan was to be a way of galvanizing the member states to have their own, probably national plans on anti-racism, right? So through that, through that that workshop, the research before the workshop, what I really noticed was, paucity of data. There was inadequate, data with regards to how the union is, faring in that regard.
Mhm.
And I saw this challenge from two perspectives. One, that's probably progress are not properly documented, if any. And then second being that there is no progress at all. And I'm much more inclined into sticking to the second, perspective, that there is no serious progress at all, because I believe in the age we are living in, once there are serious concrete progress, they definitely will be documented and they will be accessible somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's research prior to that workshop. Our research were actually very, very, challenged by data. But yeah, we saw a couple of, incidents of affirmative actions in places like France,
Yeah.
Belgium, and I think, Italy and Spain. these governments have a couple of initiatives, sometimes maybe internships or something that tries to like, bridge the divide,
Mhm.
encourage migrant integrations and all of that.
Yeah.
But then, as at the time I checked last year, I think still more than 50%, yes, of these members, the EU member states, still don't have concrete and a robust national anti-racism plan.
Mm.
It goes to show how how should I say porous, or how effective the anti-racism plan has been so far. It's actually almost expiring, just 2 months to go now. It's expiring September 2025.
Yeah.
There are already plans on the way for its succession. I think I saw an opinion poll recently that's trying to like gather opinions on how to initiate the next anti-racism action plan. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we have one that have already stayed half a decade, right? But yeah, there's no much. There's still, in fact, we've seen situations where issues of racism and all of that have been reported. Severe cases have also been reported across the EU within the period that the last time within the regime of the current plan, and so, and it's actually it shows that there's still a lot of work to do within the EU in that regard.
Yeah.
It's quite a supernatural system, and there is this the EU, the decision making system in the EU is quite a complex one.
Yeah.
One of the ways you understand this is principle of subsidiarity, which argues that decisions should be made at the level to which they resonate the most. So that means if you're going to make a decision regarding a municipality, it's best that the level of governance within that municipality makes that decision because they understand the context properly to make that decision. And
Mm.
that's why within the EU, though you understand the EU decision making from this angle, there's usually still a need for something that is overarching. So though that subsidiarity principle plays out a lot in the EU, in that a lot of policies allows member states to adapt, to like have their own say, have their own approach. And then we have some clear policies that usually give a form of federal inclination within the EU, where you have the union decides and is binding. So
Mm.
this policy making within the EU is quite a very complex one,
Yeah.
but the ones that are binding, they are usually referred to as regulations. Once they've been made, they are just ratified by the member states. There is no you just have to adapt to it, adapt your national systems to what the union has made.
Oh,
So
okay.
I do feel that if such kind of you know robust mechanism can follow the anti-racism action plan, it would have been really good.
Yeah.
Because now what we are experiencing is the fact that, given the lack of the lack of power, or should I say the lack of enforcement drive that follows this plan, because they are just like paperwork, that just gives some drives or some encouragement to national government to act, right?
Yeah.
So, given the lack of that enforcement strategy within this kind of planning, several member states don't take these issues so hard. Many of these member states sees these policies like the union doing its thing, making recommendations. If we like, we buy into them. If we like, we do not hear about them, something like that. So I think the European Union has to do more in terms of creating more that's a obligatory kind of narrative, obligating the member states really well through these policies. I know it might not be for some technical reasons, it might not be possible to enact the next anti-racism action plan as a regulation, which means member states will not have a say. They just have to adopt whatever has been said by the union. It might not be so easy to adapt it that way. But I think there should be some other mechanisms that should make it binding, kind of, on member states to do something about it, to take the plan seriously, to take initiatives to, yeah, I think that's what is really lacking. But yeah, overall, it's still, I still believe it's still progress anyhow. So just to, like, accelerate the momentum to create more impact. That's just what I think should be done. The European Union key institutions have tried as much as they can to be, um, you know inclusive,
Yeah.
especially with regards to how policies are made and all of that. But I still believe much has to be done, because
Mhm.
we've also still seen a lot of events that sometimes has clear implications for migrants, and you realize that you can hardly see minority faces in the rooms.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and also it happens to at the national levels.
Hmm.
And so, in fact, there are still some countries, I believe there are still some countries that migrants might naturally feel unwelcomed,
Yeah.
probably how they are treated by locals and all of that. So there's still a lot of work to do. And I think the union still has to do a lot in terms of integration. If you
Yeah.
are deciding on issues that affect minorities, if possible, less than
Mhm.
50% of the plenary should be minority people, and not necessarily Europeans, because these are you'll be dealing with issues that are essentially lived experiences, and the best way to get the most out of them is to have those that have this experience,
Mhm. Mhm.
forming part of the quorum for whether policy making or the implementation itself.
Yeah. Are there any, like, is there a large, or not a large, you kind of answered that, but are there migrants representing, like, people who have gone, like, for example, in our situation here, like, speaking about
Mm,
undocumented people
yeah.
migrate across to Europe, are there people such as who represent, like, in the EU or at government levels, who've actually gone through that experience themselves, or are they just collecting data and information from, say, on people who have been undocumented migrants? Or is there anyone that you can think of who is actively in policy making, representing their experience?
I think Picum is there. Actually, Picum is not essentially, um, should I say, it's not essentially part of the union.
Yeah.
Picum is more or less like a non-governmental organization.
Okay.
I think it's platform uh, for the inclusion of undocumented migrants within the
Okay.
EU. PICOM, that's the acronym actually, but
Yeah.
the meaning actually is, it's a non-governmental that is focused exclusively on the issue of undocumented migrants in the EU. So
Okay.
they lobby, they influence policy, they undertake research, they partner several European institutions to ensure that, from being undocumented, these migrants can be regularized and,
Yeah.
start being, recognized and legal residents within the EU.
Yeah.
But within the context of the European Union itself, I can't really think of anyone now. But I know that PICOM have been working closely with European institutions with regards to the issue of undocumented migrants.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, can you spell out that acronym?
PICUM, that's a PICUM.
UM. Okay. Cool. That's good to know. Okay. We just have a couple minutes left here. So
Yeah.
what are your aspirations for the next phase of your career in international development and policy? And I'm going to combine this last question. What advice would you give to young Africans aspiring to make an impact in global policy and governance?
Hmm. For for my aspiration, my next phase, uh,
Good
um,
question.
actually let me just put it simply as I'm looking forward to working with a mission-driven international organization,
Okay.
more specifically international development organization.
Mm-hmm.
International development is more concerned about fighting poverty,
Yeah.
managing the global divide. So yeah, I'm looking forward to working with a mission-based because I'm always driven by mission. That's essentially why I want to work with them. The fact
Yeah.
that for example, you say the World Bank Group known for fighting poverty globally,
Mm-hmm.
then take, for example, you talk about, for example, you say IOM, trying to
Yeah.
make sure that migration is seen as a force for good,
Yeah.
So these are the kind of institutions I'll look forward to working with.